So, good evening, everybody. I'm going to welcome you to this joint meeting between the Board of County Commissioners and the Calvert County Board of Education. We'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So, everyone please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So, I really don't think we need to approve the agenda. Just having a conversation, I hope.
Yes, please. Follow the agenda.
We have to approve the agenda.
Yes, Commissioner.
Jeez. Okay,
Move to approve?
Second.
a motion is second to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Do we need to approve the agenda too?
Board of Ed.
I'm just messing with you. Okay. I have no public service announcements. So before we begin, I just want to thank the Board of Education for joining us tonight to have a discussion about the performance audit of their budget. I think that, the format tonight, it's just a discussion about moving forward. I think that last spring, when the Board of Education made their budget request, caught a few of us by surprise. We had not seen a request like that in the past, and had 3 new commissioners who certainly caught them by surprise. And it started some discussions about the Board of Education budget and just trying to make sure that we're spending our money just like we do our own as effectively and as efficiently as we can. And so we had been kicking around the idea of I hate to call it a performance audit because makes it sound like something that it's really not. Because everybody, when you say audit, everybody thinks, oh, what are they doing wrong? Well, they're not doing anything wrong. It's more of an evaluation of, things that you do just to make sure you're doing them as best you can. And we had some discussions with the superintendent during the budget process and kicking it around. So finally formalized and got the 2 groups together, which is not an easy task, I will admit. So I want to thank you all. And at this time, Madam President, would you like to say anything?
Sure, thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank those that came tonight to listen to and hear our discussion of having a potential procurement audit done of the school system. And I agree with the president and what he has said. Tonight's discussion should be pretty good for the school system and should help the community in understanding what the school system does to come up with their budget and should support what we have been doing in the past. So thank you all for joining us tonight, and hopefully as we move forward, community questions will be answered and some resolution will come to the table and additional trust will be built between the 2 boards.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, this is just a discussion, and as the president said, we're just trying to figure out the best path forward and making sure we're spending our dollars efficiently and effectively, because the school board budget is our largest line item in our budget. And we do the same thing within our own budget, looking at different programs and departments. So it's not unusual for government to do something like this. So I guess I can turn over to the county administrator. You're going to go through a few quick slides.
We'll do.
Again, good evening to both boards of county commissioners and Board of Education. I rarely read slides word for word. I will probably do a little bit more of that tonight. I want the public, both here and listening, to really hear what the intention is without my ad-libbing as we go along. So please bear with me. So this, when we get to the end for the Board of Education, I have provided you what is the final, it'll be the final slide. What you have is a list of items that, as we go through this, you'll hear these in the presentation itself, but then those will be some of the topics that we will discuss at the very end, and that's a discussion that both boards would then at that time come together and agree or disagree, but to get us to where we need to move forward. So with that, I'll start with the first regarding a performance audit. Pretty straightforward. As long as I can get this to work. All right, Ashley, where are you?
Sit down, bud. You got it.
Are we
There,
going?
there.
Well, I hit the up button. Defining a performance audit. Performance audit means an assessment of an entity's or program's practices to determine whether the entity or program is operating economically and efficiently, whether corrective actions for improving its performance are appropriate. All of these slides have an annotated code to them. It's the educational article 5-110. I won't repeat that throughout, but please know that is the legal documentation that provides us guidance as we move forward.
See down, arrow. No.
Up arrow works half the time and down arrow the other half. Okay, right there.
Method. Oh,
Go back. All right, you have yourself a job, Katie.
okay, got it.
Methods of having such an audit performed. In the absence of an agreement between a county governing body and a county school board, the State Department of Education, at the request of the county governing body, shall contract for a performance audit of the county public school system to address the issues raised in the county's request. So, obviously we know by looking at the budget that the Board of Education is the largest single category of expenditure of public funds in the county government. This investment in our future pays great dividends and there's no intent to reduce funding for the Board of Education. I say again, there's no intent through this audit to reduce funding. Performance audits allow us to look at specific areas of expenditure to ensure that the dividends are being achieved efficiently and may offer recommendations to do more with the same financial investment. While state law allows the county to proceed with a performance audit without agreement of the Board of Education, it also allows the Board of County Commissioners and Board of Education to agree to have an audit performed. The County Commissioners requested this meeting in open session on April 25th so that the boards can work collaboratively to ensure the efficient use of taxpayer revenue. The cost of a performance audit under this section shall be shared equally between the county governing body and the county board, meaning the Board of Education, and again, this is Article 5-110. The state indicates that the cost of a performance audit will be equally shared, though the county commissioners requested this discussion on a performance audit prior to submission of the Board of Education's budget for the current fiscal year. It is not apparent if that budget included funding for its share of a performance audit. Because this audit is not intended to take away from educational resources, it is anticipated that the boards may discuss this point further and reach agreement regarding the allocation of costs. It is requested that the boards agree to the application of the same standards as applied to a performance audit conducted through the State Department of Education. That the audit shall be conducted in accordance with generally accepted government auditing standards. It is requested that the boards agree to the application of the same limitation on scope as applied to a performance audit conducted through the State Department of Education. And the audit may not include an assessment or evaluation of the county board's efforts to meet the standards of the Maryland School Performance Program. Other than the limited scope of the performance audit on the previous slide, it is for the boards to decide if there can be agreement on the scope of the performance audit. Staff is here to assist the boards find agreement in defining with specificity the scope of work that will be used by the contractor to define its tasks, lists, and deliverables. It is intended that this performance audit be an objective review of practices, policies, and decisions. The purpose of a performance audit is not to assign blame, point fingers. There is no need to hide from it. We must and will embrace the audit for what purposes it serves to move forward and share it with the public for transparency. This independent review will educate us as decision makers and all of us as a community as we strive to continue improving the county's position in education and, where possible, finding room to do more with what we have, not overburdening the taxpayers. This performance audit is a first step towards a much more involved discussion about findings and recommendations, not all of which may be endorsed or implemented at the same time. We appreciate the board's willingness to begin the journey of self-discovery in an open and transparent way. And I will read that sentence again because I think it's the true intent. It's that we, the boards, in plural, I think there's a willingness to make the point that we need to work together so that we can move forward, and that's what we're here for tonight. So that really brings us to a slide that's not on the screen, but I did provide earlier, and it's a list of items as provided by staff for review tonight. And at this point, I can go down the list, Mr. President. Mr. President, I can go down the list also, if you like, if that's the way that we would like to do it. And for each one, I guess we could have that discussion at that time. So, recommended areas of review include, number 1, evaluate and provide a detailed analysis of historical non-salary expenditures documenting how funds were spent and identifying potential errors, irregularities, and outliers in spending. Shall I go one by one?
Probably.
So I would like to start with a question. Before you start reading the recommended areas of review, and I should have stated this question before you began. I would like to ask our Board of County Commissioners, what specifically has occurred at the school system to bring you all to this point where you feel a performance audit is necessary?
So I don't think that I wish we were sitting side by side.
I know, we should be sort of.
They set us up
Well,
like we
we
do on
actually can see.
Tuesdays. And,
Yeah.
I don't think that any particular thing happened. As I said in opening comments, I think the ask for 24 million caught some people by surprise and generated a lot of discussion about where's the money going. As I said earlier, we don't believe anything wrong has occurred. I think it's more about moving forward, making sure that everybody's, on the same page as far as practices and processes. This first bullet point, I think, arose when we first started meeting, and Mr. Johnson's new, and the superintendent are new. We had some discussions about fund balance, and being new, he wasn't sure how that fund balance had accumulated and where it exactly came from. So little things like that, I think that just triggered thoughts in people's minds about just knowing. It's not about finding something wrong. It's just about knowing where the money came from, where it's going to go in the future, and making sure that we're just doing the best we can with the taxpayers' dollars.
Understood. And are you aware that the school system is audited on several different occasions by several different entities? And currently, we both share the same auditing firm that does our annual financial statement review.
Sure. We're audited too, but I don't think that the intent of those audits is the same as the intent of this audit.
What's the intent of this audit?
So I think that's the purpose.
So, and you do understand that we're also audited by the Office of Legislative Audits, which does do a performance audit of the school system and has outlined some findings in the past which have been corrected. There are a few that are repeat findings, and the school system is still continuing to improve processes and procedures to make sure that those findings are corrected?
Mhm.
All right.
Mhm. Yep.
And that OLA audit will be coming up within the next year and a half? Are you aware of that?
Yeah, because I think they do those regularly anyway.
Every
They're
3
scheduled.
years,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, they're
All
on a
right.
regular schedule. Yep. Yep.
I'll repeat question for topic number 1. Evaluate and provide a detailed analysis of historical non-salary expenditures, documenting how funds were spent, and identifying potential errors, irregularities, and outliers in spending. Any discussion on number 1? Number 2, evaluate and provide a detailed analysis of salary expenditures and payroll data to identify potential errors, irregularities, and outliers in spending. Any discussion? Number 3, evaluate and provide an internal control review and assessment, identifying potential internal control deficiencies and recommendations for correcting those deficiencies. Is there any discussion? Number 4, identify and provide any potential efficiencies or procedures that would lead to cost savings. Is there any discussion? Number 5, evaluate the policies, practices, protocols, authorities, statutes, and regulations for procurement and personnel actions, and determine if actions are consistent with those, and if efficiencies could be found if modifications were made. Is there any discussion? Number 6, assess the alignment of the Calvert County Board of Education's actions regarding procurement contracts and personnel actions with authorized policies, practices, protocols, authorities, statutes, and regulations. Is there any discussion? Number 7, using a random sample of procurements issued by the Calvert County Board of Education in fiscal year 2019 through 2022, analyze to determine whether the procurements are appropriate and aligned with the board policies and local statutes and regulations. Is there any discussion? Number 8, using a random sample, determine if personnel actions performed by the Calvert County Board of Education in fiscal year 2019 through fiscal year 2022 were consistent with board policy, practice, local statutes, and regulations. Final comment, number 9. Determine if closed sessions, executive sessions, and administrative functions of the Calvert County Board of Education were conducted in accordance with applicable law, regulations, and policies, including without limitation, the Maryland Open Meetings Act. Is there any discussion on number 9? With that, President, I have concluded the list.
Is that you?
Yeah, I have kind
Good.
So to get back to your question, it's a good day for Calvert County when 2 of its elected boards come together for the common goal of improving our education foundation for the people and for the children of this county. And we must look out for our future while also being fiscally responsible and transparent. My 20% was this year when it was asked for 24 million over the MOE. I know we had a lot of talks with the blueprint and how much that was going to cost us. Last year we overfunded MOE by 12.5 million. where did the money go? What line item? This year, we went 13.4 million over. Where did that monies go? And what I need to know is, with my 20%, is with the blueprint coming down the pike, is what's next year? So I need to know what's in this here fully. Page 9 says enrollment's going down. I need to be confident that I'm spending the citizens' money effectively and for the children of this county. So that's my 20%.
And so, Commissioner Cox, when you read the budget book, are you stating that you don't understand, based on our book, where the funding is going?
So when the board came back to us back a couple months ago, they were asking for $24 extra million. We agreed to 13.414 million, which was not in the budget book. So next year, with blueprints coming down the pike, where are we going to be?
So after the county commissioners approve their portion of funding to the school system does a reconciliation based on the funding that is approved. So Mr. Johnson and Dr. Townsell are in discussions to do that reconciliation, to produce a final approved budget book that would show you how that 13 million that the county has given us will be spent.
Okay.
Can I read a statement that I made? Should I take this one? My statement touches on quite a few points that were already made, but I have to write things down because I'm not very good at ad-libbing. So just like Commissioner Hance said, I think a big part of what gave rise to the concern about our budget and the fact that now we're talking about commissioning an audit was because we presented the commissioners with a budget that requested a year-over-year increase that was 3 times higher than anything they had ever given us before. It was a shock to all of us. And I believe that to know that our spending level had grown so dramatically. But breaking it down, as I laid out in detail at our last meeting, you see that it's due to the aggressive salary and pre-K expansion plans of the blueprint, negotiated salary increases, and to our desire to offer the support staff equivalent increases. And of course, among other things, to the inflationary environment and continued product shortages that we're finding ourselves in. So, we asked for a full budget to do what we felt needed to be done to address things like behavioral issues in the schools and to set ourselves up for real, quantifiable improvement in student academic performance. And the commissioners had, as usual, the hard job of figuring out how much they can afford to give us. I must say that for years, our commissioners have supported this school system above maintenance of effort, unlike some very unlucky other school districts. And for that, I am very appreciative. This year, they didn't give us what we wanted, but they've provided enough to thankfully allow us to meet our salary goals for next year, which has, but because of the reduction, that's meant that we've had some very difficult tasks to go back and look at. As any public official knows, the exercise of identifying areas in your spending that will have to be cut means combing through line item by line item and contract by contract to decide what is essential, what is effective, and what can no longer be afforded. And that in itself is a great efficiency exercise. So getting back to the audit, normally audits are requested due to anomalies that stick out either operationally, like the organization consistently does not meet expectations, or financially, like the organization's spending is out of line with others that they can be compared to. Over the past 11 years as a Board of Ed member, I have done deep dives into the data provided by the Maryland State Department of Education to compare our district to all others in the state. And whereas recently we've ranked as high as 7th of the wealthiest county per person, meaning local revenues divided by local population, Our school district expenditures have consistently, for the last decade, placed us in the middle of the road, around 12 out of the 24 counties in spending per pupil, which means to me that we are able to maintain an excellent school system without breaking the bank. And for the money spent, the citizens of Calvert County get a pretty good bang for their buck. As far as results of what this spending gets you, before COVID, our academic performance placed us in the top 5 test scores, and we achieved this without profligate spending. A performance audit is intended to assess whether a district is operating economically and efficiently, and whether corrective actions for improving performance are appropriate. The Howard County government decided in 2020 to commission a performance audit of their school system, mainly due to the fact that their health insurance fund was in a continued deficit position. But they agreed to do the audit and then came back and limited the audit scope to 4 items. And even at that limited scope, the cost to them was $250,000. The only results that I could find from that audit that they performed was that the audit affirmed several actions and improvements made by the county and the school system over the past several years, and it did include a multi-year plan to pay down the health fund deficit. So I'm just wondering if they felt their audit was worth the money spent. And as Commissioner, you're not a commissioner, President Claggett said, the Office of Legislative Audit does regularly, about every 3 to 5 years, a financial management practices audit. The last one we had was in 2020. They identified findings, which I have, in looking at other school districts, similar audits, we all have, they just sort of repeat the same types of findings. So, you know, there's always room for improvement, but a lot of the school systems have the exact same findings as we did. And in our, we can pass along our response to that audit, which says that we have addressed corrective actions for every single one of those findings. As far as what our school system has done to evaluate ourselves, our major spending areas, since I have been on the board, we have conducted 2 full studies of our transportation program. One in 2011, looking at our private contractor system versus an in-house system, and one in 2017, which looked at efficiencies and financial viability. Each time, we implemented improvements to our system, but decided to stay with our private contractor model because, as you well know, of the importance of supporting small businesses in our county, and because the geographic and other distance issues don't lend our county to the central depot model. On top of that, we've done a special ed study. We've put out to bid several times our healthcare and prescription contracts, and have been able to reduce the percentage of our healthcare insurance costs as a percent of our payroll from 20% down to 18.5%. And we've also, right now, we're undertaking a study of how we pay our support staff to make sure that we're in line with other counties, and more importantly, that we're competitive. All of this is to say that I believe that as the largest employer in Calvert County, we are a lean and mean organization. We are small compared to other counties around us, but we are mighty when it comes to performance. And we do a good job of spending Calvert funds responsibly. So on the one hand, I'd like the audit to take place because I do not believe that there would be any kind of a sizable finding that would explain, that would make you guys feel comfortable. And I do worry very much about the cost to us collectively, you know, as a county. I asked myself if it were up to me to spend money for this study and to take up an untold number of hours of staff time for our staff who are already overworked and have undergone audits over and over. Would it be worth it? And my answer to myself is no. I've had the advantage of studying our system for over a decade, so it's easy for me to make the decision based on that fact. And yes, as in any report, I'm sure there'll be findings that say that some things could be done a little bit better, but I'm thinking that the return on investment for this exercise would be very low and not worth the cost and the time sink. The commissioners don't need any of our votes, I don't believe, to go forward. But I wish that, I'm hoping that we can work together in a cooperative way to make them all feel comfortable with our level of spending. It's a big job to evaluate the effectiveness of a school system because it's a very complicated system. Business, we're not only supposed to keep everyone safe 7 to 8 hours a day and provide them with excellent education or a rewarding career, we're also held responsible for addressing societal problems like drug use and violence, mental health, and hunger. School systems have 1,000 working parts that all need to be synchronized, and all the departments have to work together for the system to be successful. And so, therefore, looking at individual departments without looking at the whole means that you need to have a really in-depth, top-level understanding to do a good evaluation. So, my feeling is that I just don't want the county to, it's a big undertaking. If you really want to get to the nuts and bolts of every single thing in this 140-page document, I would love it if we could get the commissioners together and us together and our finance teams together and go through it. We have everything in this document. Some people said we didn't have a line item budget. In this document that gets down to kindergarten snacks, that gets down to spending by building, that talks about every single component that we spend by department. We have a Board of Ed, you can see the Board of Ed's individual budget in here and the superintendent's budget. Our salary, of the $267 million in our salary, 82% of that are people. It is salaries. Teacher salaries are $125 million. All other salaries are $40 million. The benefits and taxes on top of that are another 50, so that's $219 million of a $267 million are people. We have 3 unions that comb through every single person's salary, and we know that we're competitive, but we are not the top of salary levels. So there's no profligate spending there. And so that leaves a 50 some odd million dollars to look at, $48 million of other spending. Half of that is our transportation department, which is complicated, yes, but we can provide you with as much information individually as possible, and maybe that's where we should spend the time. As opposed, I just worry about us spending the money, and I will be quiet after that.
It's quiet. So, Dawn, I agree, because, large portion of your budget is salary, and there's really not much point to auditing salary. So when you take out those different components that really aren't auditable, aren't worth auditing, there's really not a lot left in there. It's more about processes and procedures and, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so it's, it's not like we're gonna audit the $300 million or whatever it is, when you whittle it down, like you said, it's only about $50 million that you're actually looking at how it's being spent at the end of the day, in my opinion.
So thank heavens you guys gave us the salary increase that we needed. I was holding my breath there,
Yeah.
so thank you.
And the list is just a list that was put together of recommended things that people audit. I'm not saying, or I don't think we're saying that it's what we want to do, today, is do all 8 of these things on this list. I think that, they're just out on the table for discussion.
The only thing I would add is not so much from a financial piece, but an overall look at the business model, I guess, so to speak. I would hope that if an audit team is brought in, they would analyze from how are we doing with special education. We all know there's a shortage of mental health providers. That's a huge problem. I'm not gonna list a business one time, but when I first got hired, I went to that part of our county government. I said, look, I'm not saying I can fix any one of these, but I would like to know a list of what we need to work on. And in time, we have started to work that list. I know, from time to time, I hear about our athletics department, you know, could we put more money in it? Sure. But I would like, if this was the path to go, how do we sit as a whole unit? You know, do we need more in the arts? Do we need this, you know? And I don't know if these companies would provide that. The financial piece, you're right, there is not a lot of discretionary left. Once you get through the cost of running the business, there's not a lot of discretionary. But is there something out there that maybe another system's doing that we should be doing, or something that they feel things change? You know, is what's coming down the path, are we doing that? And that would be my biggest concern, is making sure, I mean, Blueprint was new to everybody, but Blueprint really only addressed one part of the school system. It didn't, unless, I mean, and I don't even profess to be an expert on Blueprint, but it didn't address everything. I think it broad stroked it. You know, we know that there's an issue with before and after cares and having enough people for that. So if it could look at it as a whole and say, hey, are we the best in academics? Are we the best in athletics, the arts, an entire school system? I would be all about that. But I don't know if that's, you know, if that's even available to us.
Go ahead. One thing I could say as superintendent of Calvert County Public Schools is that with the budget that we do have, we're going to show a return on investment in student achievement for sure. That's one thing I can show taxpayers, that your money is being well spent because of how our school district is performing. I'm very hopeful and excited with the preliminary results we have on our standardized assessments. A lot of growth. A lot of increased academic achievement all across the board, a lot of reduction of disproportionality. I think that should be the measure to say whether we're working well or not. And I bet on the teachers and the educators that are in the building every day. If we invest in them, we will get that return on investment. And we did that this year, and I can't wait to share the data once it's unembargoed.
From what I've seen, the asks have continued to grow every year. I have a lot of friends who are school teachers, and they wonder where the money's going. Fortunately, a lot of the educators and the support staff saw that money in their salaries this year, which was great. We have a list of recommended areas of review. I would suggest that we collectively go through those recommended areas of review and prioritize and see what we can come up with together. What you guys agree with, what we agree with, what we would like to see. And the other thing, surrounding jurisdictions. I mean, I think we have to compare ourselves pretty much to Charles and St. Mary's. The ask from Charles and St. Mary's was exponentially lower than the ask from Calvert this year. Now, I know Blueprint was a challenge. I know salaries were a challenge. There were some other challenges there. However, I think if we're going to compare apples to apples, that's probably about as close as we can come, rather than referring to a PG audit or other county audits as they are closest to us. The performance audit obviously is going to go into depth a whole lot more than the standard audits that we receive yearly, every 3 years, whatever the breakdown is. It's definitely going to be time consuming, without a doubt, but I think that it's fiscally responsible to look into doing this performance audit if the return on investment is close to what the price of the audit itself is going to be. That's all I have.
Well, I think that, Dr. Townsell, if scores come back and our students are doing great, I think that's wonderful, and we want that for our children. But who within our school system is underserved? When I first hit this budget, being a new county commissioner, it was a bit overwhelming. It was a bit appalling. Where's the money going to? Where are we lacking? Where can we improve? And I felt very blind going into the system with zero answers. Are we providing resources to our children who maybe lost so much during the pandemic? Our special education children, are they being served the way they need to be served? I mean, we always, and having athletic children who were offered scholarships, I understand the athletic end of it, but I also had a child who was more on the creative arts path and had a little bit of problem with learning. And it seems that everything goes into those ends. So for me, I want to know the big picture. I want to know what I'm signing off on. I want to know how we're doing in all aspects of the budget. The BOE budget for me is an unknown, and I don't spend money in my home without knowing what I'm spending it on. Thank you.
So Commissioner Grasso, based on your comments, it sounds like I have the same question for you that I had previously. So are you saying that the budget book does not explain where the money's being spent?
It does, and it's black and white, and you see it, but you understand it. You know what's behind certain aspects of it. Where are we lacking? I want us to have a fantastic school system within Calvert County, but I want to know that our money is being spent wisely and we are serving all the students within the school system.
I'll add, while there's a pause, and that's a great conjecture because we have our strategic planning process starting right now. We're going into the engagement phase. As a matter of fact, July 17th, we pulled every supervisor and administrator together in Calvert County Public Schools to identify 22 focus groups of talking about what is it you want to see in Calvert County Public Schools. Additionally, we're going to interview Board of Education members, Board of County Commissioners, and other stakeholders within the community to identify where we should be, what is a portrait of a graduate within the next 3 to 5 years. We also asked for that in the budget, and the commissioners approved giving us the money to pay for a strategic planning process. And we expect to have that draft plan to the Board of Education by December 23. But I encourage the community, everyone involved, to get involved in the strategic planning process because that's how you can get all the way in to what the expectations are for Calvert County Public School students.
And I just want to make one note. So the point was brought up that the ask from this local school system to the St. Mary's County Commissioners and to the I think you said Charles County was smaller than us, and that is because, like, for example, St. Mary's is getting $18 million from the state, additional funding for this next year, and we're getting $7.8 million. So those counties that have the larger areas of pockets of poverty, it's the way they look at the state funding, it's inversely proportionate to the wealth of the county. And so I don't have the Charles County number right in front of me, but I assume that they're even higher as the amount of money that's given to them by the state. So we're very lucky to have you guys because you have always been able to keep us competitive by giving us what the state is not. So thank you.
So if I may, I think also the importance of, defining what the scope is going to be is not just about staff and test scores, but it's also about the contracted services that we pay for. So an example of that would be transportation. So how many of those buses that we pay for break down in a year? How many of them are out of compliance with repairs? How many times do they break down and we have to send a replacement bus and a replacement bus driver? Those would be some of the things that I would think, an audit may help us see and understand and be able to kind of address those things. That's a small example, I realize, but that's just something that, when we talk about our contracted services, that might be helpful.
You as a board member have the absolute right to go and sit down with them. That we bring that kind of thing up all the time when, especially in the last audit, last transportation study, I should say, that was done. How we develop our formulas on how we reimburse the bus contractors, how we penalize them if they don't meet the required runs and things like that, or on-time runs.
But is it tracked appropriately, and do we know that all the time?
Yeah.
Just like the food, you know, maybe that's something, the cost of what we pay for our students to eat lunch, and, you know, how effective our food program is. We constantly hear things about that. You know, and is it the transportation of the trucks that we buy the food and then deliver it to the schools versus another avenue or resource that might be helpful? I'm not saying transportation is the one. I'm just giving an example of, you know, what contracted services or things that we utilize that would be beneficial to take a look. We as a board can have a discussion about the things that we want to have a look at, if that's the
Absolutely.
case. But that was just an example of a contracted service that I was thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, and we should, that's our responsibility. If we hear things from the public that things are not working adequately, then it is our responsibility to ask the superintendent to give us a presentation on that, or to go into a deep dive on that. And, you know, no system is perfect, but, you know, I just don't think we need to spend the money, waste the taxpayers' money on that, when we have the tools that we can use to
And I
try
don't
to.
think it's necessarily gonna be a waste of taxpayers' money. If you complete the performance audit, it could save the taxpayers money. I think you need to weigh it out a little bit, but if there's a return on investment that far outweighs what we have to pay for this audit, at the end of the day, this is about saving money. If this was a private business, we would want to have this audit and see if we could save some money. That's what it's all about. It's about saving the taxpayers' money. And I think we need to look at this a little bit differently than being adversarial. It's not adversarial at all. This is about saving money and making sure things are being done efficiently and effectively.
That's understood, Commissioner Ireland. I would ask, what would be the return on investment that you would like to see from this audit for you to be able to be comfortable with the findings of the audit and know that there were cost savings?
You can't define that right now. There's no way you can define it right now. It's something that, like I say, you're gonna have to, it could come back saying you guys need more money.
And
But at
if-
least the citizens of this county know that an audit was conducted, and however it falls, it falls.
And if we were determined to be underfunded, would you all commit to providing more money to the school system to make up for that underfunding?
So we can't commit to anything because the pie is only so big. And when people keep coming back asking for a larger slice of this pie, without the pie growing, it gets kind of difficult to do.
So-
But like there again, as Commissioner Cox said in the beginning in his statement, that we are here to take care of the citizens and the children of this county. We will do what we can to assist with the school system.
And we thank you for that commitment.
I just want to add to that, if we could find a 2% savings, 2% of 50 million is a lot of money. So,
Well, even with getting this, good evening, everyone. Even with getting this together, we've been communicating, you guys, this is Scott Johnson. You guys know him, and Dr. Townsell. You guys can call them, make appointments with them. We've been asking for what you guys were looking for and ask. We get this 2 minutes before the meeting starts. So that's not us trying to work together and to get things done. All these folks here, this is like, Brandon, this is 90% of the governing decision makers in Calvert County sitting right here, right now. I mean, there are opportunities for us to get some of this taken care of. So when we're in front of them, we are not doing this. We're coming up with answers or with solutions about what we're doing. We're not hiding anything, you know, as far as having an audit, if that's what's going to make people comfortable, I'm fine with that. You know, but once again, I am along the lines of Mr. Johnson has been here for 1 year. He acquired something. So whatever that is, he has to have time to say, okay, I just moved into this house, what needs to go, what needs to stay, what needs to happen. But now it just seems like people can say whatever, they can comment whatever, they can write whatever in the paper, and people just jump all over it. fax optional. So that's what's tough. That's why we need to do this, not only in this setting, but we need to do it in a way that we can have understanding, so when we come out here, we can actually present to them, okay, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to move forward. No one's out here to hide or to I got you or anything like that. But I just thought that, you know, we've been asking for something and then we get it 2 minutes prior to. That's not in good faith. We don't have the people here so we could have actually discussed this or actually be able to have a discussion on something if you just get it just before the meeting. So, once again, I appreciate everything that you guys are doing. I mean, Mark, we just had a conversation where we were laughing and joking, you know, so we're all residents and we all are on the same page. We want the same thing. We want what's best for our students. That's our job. You guys want what's best for the community and the students. So we all have jobs and roles and responsibilities that we focus on. When it comes to, I want to know this line, I want to know exactly this, exactly that. You know, we are not the people, but there are people who know these things. So if you make an inquiry, if you call, Miss Maxey is, man, that lady works her butt off. Anything you need or ask or want to know, you can do it if you want to find it. But some people would rather just wait and read the paper and just take that and run with that instead of trying to find out any sort of facts to support whatever they're thinking. So it just makes it tough when we are here at this time and we're trying to move forward, but it just seems like it is still contentious.
I would like Mr. Johnson's opinion and Dr. Townsend's opinion, being new in the position. Would this audit help you in your positions?
There may be some benefit, but I certainly respect Trustee Belinsky's concern that there may not be sufficient benefit to pay for the cost.
To add, I trust in the team that we have. I think we can get the job done efficiently and effectively with the current team that we have. So personally, I don't think it's necessary. I'll do whatever my board asks me to do, however.
I think it would be important for us to define the scope and then know what the cost is, because I don't know that we can sit here and say that we solidly know what the return on the investment is when we don't know what the cost of the investment will be.
Correct.
So I think we're, you know, while it's a concern, I do realize, but I think that, you know, having a discussion and having an opportunity to maybe absorb and have, you know, further discussion about the request here would be a start, and then to identify the scope and then see how much it costs, then to maybe have subsequent discussions after that.
I'd also like to add that we have to remember the intent of this. This is not a personal attack on anyone. I think our financial people are doing an amazing job, but their job is to make sure things are done legally. This audit, my understanding of this audit, is to make sure that this is things are being done cost efficiently. That is not their job. Their job is to make sure the legalities are being followed.
I would disagree with that. I think that as an employee of the school system, that our employees take it upon themselves to do things in a cost-efficient manner. They do professional development on an annual basis to go out and find best practices across the United States that they can implement here in Calvert County. And I think that each of them take that seriously and do bring back best practices and do try to have to put cost savings in place so that they're working smarter and not harder, as people say.
Well, this audit would provide evidence.
So what's the bottom line? Are we gonna be able to work together? Are we gonna be able to get together again and have some conversations? Make sure the information that you get is not 2 minutes before you get here? Or is this gonna continue as an adversarial process between us, because it's incumbent upon us that we manage our money wisely, and our money is not our money, it is our constituents' money. We all want our children to be educated. We want them to be in a safe environment, and we need to talk to each other and to come to conclusions with positive outcomes that will further our working relationship, which in turn will benefit our constituents and most of all, our children.
And Ms. Commissioner Grasso, we completely agree. I believe all colleagues on the board agree to that. And I think that the school system, in thinking about your response to the question that I asked you, maybe we need to do a better job of ensuring that we share information with the county commissioners on our programs that are happening within the school system to assure you that those who are underserved are being served, and that those who have questions are having their questions answered. And as well, we invite you all to attend our meetings and to read our agendas and to stay abreast of what's happening in the school system so that you can stay informed, to be able to assure the residents that the money that you are giving to the school system as your county portion of the budget is being spent wisely.
Most definitely.
I just have a question here. Did we not request 6 gifted and talented teachers?
We requested 2 in the budget to the county commissioners.
And that was cut out, correct?
It was not.
So how many total do we have?
We have 2 additional added this year.
So that will be a total of 6?
It will be,
I don't want to misspeak. I don't have the number in front, but in addition to the teachers we added 2 additional
yes,
teachers.
we added 2 this year,
So
and
we
I believe
had
that there are
2,
6
and we will
now.
have 2 more.
Yes.
So that's 4. 4 gifted and talented teachers for 13 elementary schools. That is not meeting the needs of our students in gifted and talented.
Correct.
And a lot of those children are having to are only getting that service if they are able to get transportation home after school. There's no equity in that.
Understood. There's
we
many
need more
areas where equity is not being met. And I share your equity concerns. I was the one who made the motion to add the 2 additional gifted and talented teachers because I see that as a weakness in our school system. And we have to move forward on something we're committed to. But there are also other areas we're committed, and we have to decide as a board what's important and where we can add and where we can subtract in order to move forward. So those are budgeting decisions as we move forward in future years.
That's a budget concern directly affecting children, and that.
So you think this performance evaluation or audit would tell us to hire more gifted and talented? And would it also tell us where
Well, I
we're
don't-
supposed to reduce?
I don't think that
budget?
we're doing it on personnel, but if we found money, wouldn't it be nice to be able to hire more people
Absolutely.
if the money were found?
And so we also, we asked for 2 assistant principals, 1 for Calvert High and 1 for Patuxent High, to get them 4 to be equivalent with Huntingtown and Northern. With the addition of the gifted and talented teachers, we couldn't no longer fund the assistant principals. So looking at and scrubbing our budget book, we know we're down to the bone. Even right now, we're across all departments cutting to 0.5% from every department in Calvert County Public Schools to have a balanced budget to present to our Board of Education. So as the superintendent, I know we're lean and down to the bone. I do understand that because we also have new commissioners, there's some understanding that must be had, but I would like to commit my team to being open to answering any question that comes from our elected officials, so there can be clarity on what is happening with the monies. And I do believe even going through the budget process, we probably met maybe a dozen times back and forth, and I've been given probably over 100 questions specifically from the county side, and those questions have been answered, and we can answer 1,000 more if need be, because we're committed to earning the trust from our county commissioners and continue. I just want to show that with what we have young people achieving better than they ever had. What I told our team is I don't ever want to talk about how Calvert County used to be top 5. We're still saying that today. I want to be top 1, 2, 3 in the next 1, 2, 3 years. And I do believe we can do that with the budget process we have in place, with the team we have in place, education, administrators and teachers alike. I do believe when we show how our young people are achieving with the monies and budget we have, everyone will feel that we're doing the right thing with our finances. And that's no way to be contentious, adversarial, just sitting in the seat. I know we're doing what's right financially. And if the team decide we must go with the audit, we're going to do the audit. And then hopefully that proves 1 or 2 things. Things have been going well, or there's a potential change or savings in this area here. So I'm approaching this with an open mind and keeping young people at the forefront of it.
Maybe it makes sense to, I mean, if I were in your position, what I would want to do is to get bids, and we'll have these firms who somehow are able to delve in a relatively short time period into a school's overall budget and figure out how all the working parts work together, and then to figure out where potential cost savings are, and still be effective and not impact the effectiveness of the school system. But if I were you, I would get some bids, have them look at the last maybe 2 OLAs, Office of Legislative Audits, their performance audits, to just see, and then look at our budget to see that 82% of it's people oriented. If they're worried about some of these 9 areas of review did say payroll, you know, so if they decide, if they think that the best bang for the buck would be to look at payroll, you know, that's just, and that it's a way to limit the scope, you know, because I think it's going to be way too expensive, you know, to try to just leave an open-ended audit for these guys. But so I personally am not going to offer, you know, I don't believe that these are necessary. So you don't need our votes, right? Is that correct? You don't need a vote from the board. Is that a correct statement?
There's 2 ways of doing a performance audit. The first way is by agreement of the 2 boards, which would require a public vote of each board. And I would assume that before such a vote could take place, there would have to be some understanding as to the scope, how it would be publicly procured, whether you do it on a bid or a competitive sealed proposal, or whether you piggyback on another entity. There would have to be an agreement between the 2 boards as to who's going to pay for it. The statute specifically provides that in the absence of an agreement between the 2 boards, the Board of County Commissioners has the right to request that the Maryland State Department of Education enter into a contract for the performance audit, quote, on the issues raised in the county's request. And so there would have to be a delineation of the specific issues if it's going to be sent to the state. The state would then do its own procurement of a contract, and then the costs would be shared between the 2 boards. The idea, though, is that any performance audit be conducted within a sufficient period of time that it would be meaningful for the creation of the next budget. And even though we're in July, we all know that budgets are created well in advance of June 30 of 2024. So you would really need the results probably by November or December in order to meaningfully impact the FY25 budget. But you know, there's 2 ways. You know, either we do it by agreement of the 2 boards after public vote by the 2 boards, and then you go into a procurement, or you go to MSD and ask that they do it.
And the 8 topics or recommended topics of or areas of audit were just provided for discussion purposes. It wasn't intended to put you on the spot and only give you a few minutes to make a decision. You know, I think what we were trying to do tonight was determine a scope, and that scope could be very narrow. It could be a starting point where at least we start a process at something. I don't know how we bid out a performance audit without any parameters of the audit. That would be, you know, that would be quite an entertaining, and that is not our intention. I think that if we could at least go through this list of 8 items and pick 2, you know, that we would agree to have audited, it's a start. And
So given what Mr. O'Mealy has said regarding an audit and the impact on the next budget, if your intent was for the audit to be able to provide cost savings for your next budget review, I personally don't feel that a performance audit would be able to be done by October of this year to be able to impact the next budget numbers. So if that was the intent, maybe we should consider continuing our discussions, continuing to inform and allowing you all to ask questions, and us continuing to meet as a group to further this discussion on how we move forward and what areas potentially may need examination.
so we don't finalize our budget until June. We make some, you know, last tweaks in April, so I don't think that we need findings by October.
Our budget needs to be reviewed and put together before we can send it to you. So if it is to
Absolutely.
impact our budget, we would need numbers fairly quickly as we start our budget process in October.
But I shouldn't assume. I would assume you would just move forward with your budget process just like you normally would, and then the conclusion of the audit, whenever that comes, if it come in time, if it doesn't come in time, that would just create discussion points, if there were any. The audit, as was mentioned earlier, the audit could come back and say that we are underfunding you in certain areas. It could say a multitude of things, so I just think that the goal of the board was try to get the process moving in some form. If I'm misspeaking, my board needs to straighten
No,
me
I think
out.
we've been trying to have this meeting for some time. I'm glad we finally did. But if we keep kicking this can down the road, we're gonna it'll be the same result time after time after time. I think we need to take some steps now to, if we're gonna move forward, to see which way we're gonna move forward. That's, my suggestion. Do both boards agree to the performance audit, or do we have to go to the state for it?
You know, if we can determine the scope, I think that's the important issue.
Absolutely. But we can at least determine if we're gonna agree to do it, and then
Yes.
we can determine the scope after the fact.
Right, because there are certainly items on this list that we're not concerned about or think need to be audited.
So,
But they're on the
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
did you say that there are certain items on this list that you're not concerned about?
Yeah. The salary expenditures, you know, as we talked earlier, most of that is for union contracts for teachers. I don't know what we're gonna audit. And that's the
Okay.
biggest bulk
So
of
maybe
your
you may
budget.
want to start there with eliminating the items you all placed on the list that you're no longer concerned with.
I believe that's item,
So that was, not
Two.
to put you on the spot, but that was gonna be, I was gonna say, are there items that right now we could go through and just say that it's a no, that there's not a concern on either side?
Yeah, because
Or-
I'm concerned, this is the list you provided.
but it's just a list of items that are that are
So-
normally under audit.
So you know what,
It's not a
It's
let,
not, this list was not developed by us as, this is what we want to do. This is just a list of items that fall under performance audits.
Understood, but wouldn't the audit be done to provide you some information that you all need to make future decisions? So it would be prudent to conduct an audit on something that's going to be beneficial to your decision-making,
And hopefully you too.
and not just willy-nilly choose something just because they're typical areas that are audited.
As
So
I said,
I-
it's just a list.
So I found the list to be helpful, so I appreciate that, thank you. But if I was to look at them right now, if we wanted to kind of, as Commissioner Ireland said, kick the can down the road, are we kicking it or are we stopping it? I don't know. Anyway, I think number 9 specifically about determining if closed sessions, executive sessions, administrative functions, and things, about in compliance with the Open Meetings Act, that would be one that at least for myself personally, is not one of interest, and I don't think that would be beneficial to audit.
No,
Cost saving.
it's not for me either.
Okay.
I got 4 quiet board members with me tonight. So they're gonna kick me when I'm wrong, I'm sure. But somebody's gotta start this discussion.
May I recommend a consideration of number 2?
So I think 2 is what I've X'd for me.
2 and 9.
Yeah, 2 and 9.
What
So
about
far.
number 5?
I had 5 on my list to do.
I did too.
I had a star next to number 4 as I read through it as soon as I sat down.
May I verify that, are we eliminating or are we clarifying that we want?
I think we're eliminating 2 and 9, and right now we are considering 4 and 5 on the to-do list. And if I'm wrong, anybody correct me.
So, can we have a discussion about 2, Commissioner Hance? In that, the evaluating the analysis of salary expenditures and payroll, and it may be because this is a suggestion, and it needs to be, identified or discussed further, but wouldn't this be like, could this be included, the ratio of the number of students to teachers that we have, those sorts of things?
I would
No,
think-
but to me, I mean, you're identifying potential errors, irregularities, and outliers too in that. I mean, it's not just about the salary itself.
I think that would also encompass special education.
You identify.
So I do not think that should be eliminated.
It's just, for me, that's a big item when you think about the scope of that. And I was just trying to put some things on the list that we could get done.
So I would leave the salaries themselves out of it, but the salary expenditures, but the rest of it, I would have to include.
Well, if you're talking teacher salaries, that's already dictated from the state.
Correct.
So that's been done. But I agree, are we spending enough money on special education? Are we spending enough money into programs that need assistance? And I mean, so if there's some verbiage to cut that, just mark 20% to specific programs, more so than just, I mean, like I say, Blueprint's already said what somebody's gonna make in the timelines, and at that point, then you just steps and COLAs, which we've had a standard practice of anyway, so I don't know what a deep dive on that would accomplish.
4 and 5 are important to me, and I agree number 2. I'd like to see that worded so we can make sure that, I don't want to say underserved, but the potential for our underserved students who possibly are having some problems since the pandemic, our special education children, our special needs children, that their needs are being met.
And that should also include our high achieving, which now seem to be underserved.
That's a good point too, because,
Yeah.
Somebody, who's doing the right thing and out there pushing and stuff, we should be behind them and say, go get it as hard as you can. That's a good point, because we always like to focus on, just somebody is struggling, and we forget about the people that are really doing well. That's a good point.
Number 1 is, if that's a fund balance issue, I guess I have a question for Mr. Johnson. I know we've been trying to figure out the fund balances. Have you got that all figured out?
if you could provide a little more specificity in your question, I'd be happy to.
So when we talked about the $24 million fund balance that you all are carrying, I think we had asked some questions about whether it was restricted. I couldn't find the word. Restricted or unrestricted.
Discretionary.
And I know you're new and you had just come here and it was, you know, a challenge just walking in the door trying to figure out, because I know you told me you were struggling trying to go back and figure out where some of that money had come from. And I thought the last communication I saw from you regarding that was you were still challenged to find out some of that money's original origin and whether it was restricted or unrestricted.
Thank you for the opportunity to respond to that. The part that I was not able to find the information on was how the decision was made on what amounts to assign or rather commit to fund balance in previous years. I can't tell you how the district acquired the funds. The district received more funds than it expended in some years, and so that helped to increase the fund balance over time. However, the district has increased fund balance in some years and reduced it in others. For instance, in fiscal year 21, the district's total fund balance was $28.8 million. 1 year later, June 30th, 22, the district's fund balance had dropped, total fund balance, to $24 million. So the district had actually reduced the fund balance by $4.8 million. Because I'm relatively new with the district, I don't have the history of determining or answering how the decision was made to commit fund balance over the years. I can tell you that the revenues over expenditures caused the increase in fund balance in the years during which the fund balance increased.
During the funding formula, there was a provision though, once discretionary hit a certain plateau, I think it was 5 million, it went towards OPEB. So there was a link there.
Thank you.
But that was during the funding formula.
Thank you.
And our fund balance is published every year in our audited financial statements so that it's clear and transparent to everyone what makes up our fund balance.
It is, but as I said, when we were going through the budget process, we had some questions about it, and I just want to give Mr. Johnson credit. He was brand new, and he was struggling to answer those questions. So I was just trying to affirm that he's had enough time now. He's figured out at least most of it.
I mean, a lot of these are just things, you know, not a lot, but, you know, the 5 million, he's made some estimates for the fund balance in June, and, you know, there's always going to be encumbrances that are outstanding and POs that are open and the like, and so that was $5 million for this year. Then there's stuff that's called restricted that are grant encumbrances, basically. That's another 2.5. And then the things that, you know, as a board, we have, back in the day, I think it was 2013, I can't remember, when our budget got debilitated by the huge increase in fuel prices that happened, the diesel prices went up. And so at that point, we created a committed reserve of $1 million so that we would never have to face that again. And we have things of that nature, risks, you know, so we have, and that's a standard. I'm sure you guys at the county level have reserves to mitigate, and in case there is risk that appears during the year. So that's a standard, you know, reserve accounting practice. You know, I don't know if what your fund balance looks like, but I didn't think ours was overly a surprise. But we could certainly, that'd be one of the things that we'd be, you know, can sit down with the county on and go over in detail. And if, you know, if it is a cause, you know, then maybe we can develop a new formula that we did have in place that says if we don't feel comfortable with that level, then please give us, you know, an OPEB contribution or the like.
So that's a great suggestion, Dawn. Maybe our boards can get together and work on a funding formula similar to the one that we had in the past, which would assist the commissioners in knowing what was going to be expected when we send our budget over to be funded, and we would be able to better budget because we would know what is going to be funded. And then that way, if there was anything above that, like an additional ask, we would have to explain to be able to support why we would need additional money outside of that funding formula.
I think this coming year would be a challenge until we get Blueprint satisfied. But after Blueprint is satisfied, we should have some more level funding, because I believe we was basically half this year and then half going into there. So if you set the formula in place, the way that was set up, was of course percentages. So that's gonna change. But it was very efficient in the past. And that could be something that, after we satisfy Blueprint, that we step back and look at, because it did make it, God, I hate this looking around corners. It did make it a lot easier on both boards, because there was no back and forth. We knew basically what it was going to be. You knew what it was to work with, and I think it'll be, once we get past Blueprint, would be easier, because the 13 million on top of whatever happens during the year, it's going to throw that number off. But then we should get to a level base, I would think, after that.
Right, and we're hopeful that Blueprint will level out after this year, but you never know what the Maryland General Assembly is going to do with that piece of legislation, so it could always be a variable. And I'm not saying that we base our formula on the same type of formula that was done in the past, but maybe our staff can get together and come up with a formula that works based on what Blueprint is giving us right now and what we right now know about the Blueprint. So different, but a formula.
So I'm gonna X number 1. And you're gonna try to rewrite number 2.
Can we get rid of number 8?
I had already X'd it. I can be overruled.
I think it's two
9.
through
Two of
7.
us were gonna X number 9.
Yeah.
2 of us wanted to X number 9. That really doesn't really need an audit, in my opinion. And my role here is to keep the meeting moving. I had X number 7.
I think that one, I think that would have been important to sample the procurements issued by the Board of Ed.
Someone want to keep it in?
I would say. Keeping 7 in?
Yeah, I'm 7 in.
Yeah.
Jana?
How do you, on number 7, how do you determine what's appropriate?
So I think that they're just looking to make sure now I'm just guessing here, I'm no auditor, that they're within the budget and they are aligned with the board policies and statutes and regulations.
Who these recommendations come from?
The company.
The company.
The company,
companies that
they
do
didn't
them.
explain it?
No, these are just things that we audit. So we could modify them any way we like, or kick them out entirely, or they were just a guide for discussion, instead of us trying to sit here and out of the clear blue sky, come up with stuff. So, as I said, they were just talking points.
Well, I mean, I even think, it's not negative, even looking at a procurement practice or, something that we use, something as simple as office supplies, and looking at how all of those things are procured and finding a more efficient way or a cheaper vendor or something like that to procure office supplies. It doesn't have to be, again, it's not a gotcha, it's just making sure that, some of the procurements, maybe it's the larger procurements that we want to look at to ensure that they were done in compliance with state and local and the procurement guidelines and all that.
Do you guys have a bidding process now on supplies? I mean, kind of like what we do?
Yes, we do, and I would also note that if we're looking at through fiscal year '22, that would predate our procurement supervisor and myself. And things have changed a bit over the last year.
I know with us, there's a threshold of, once it hits a certain number, then it goes to bid, and then, of course, you know, there's a vendor list which is vetted and goes through that, so I would assume you have a process similar to that now.
Well, and maybe it's not FY '19 to FY '22, maybe it's 1 year.
I would also point out that we have a bid threshold that's well below the minimum, the legal minimum. Ours is as low as $25,000.
That's for everything, anything.
Purchase of equipment, supplies, purchase services, but not staff, not
That's
employees.
across the board for everybody.
Pardon me?
It's across the board, it's the same for everybody,
It's a board policy.
because we have different levels for different people sometimes.
Mm.
But for you, it's 25,000 across the board.
It is a board policy, yes.
So I think we probably, in my opinion, could scratch 7.
We have a split field.
Well, let's just say prior to you getting here, that things weren't done the way you're doing them, and they could have been done better. And there's a cost savings in there of, say $3 million, just throw it out there. And this is all hypothetical, but say it's $3 million. And we find that out, but yet that $3 million's in your budget, and your way's better, so you're gonna save us $4 million, right?
Absolutely. I'll say,
Then he's gonna spend it somewhere.
I mean, I'll just say with the team that, you know, I've been blessed to have, I'm good. You know, the audit is gonna probably tell you to give me another 20 million.
Let's hope not.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I believe that especially procurement practices have already changed. We're good with that. I mean, we have to go to our board for $25K, and I think legally it's 50,000 if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. So, you know, I know we're good. My hope and goal is over time, our commissioners know that we're good and can trust the leadership running the school district with taxpayers, because we're also responsible for taxpayers' money. I found that out in November. We're responsible for taxpayers' money as well. So I don't want it to, I pray that it's not, we're just spending money and not thinking community, constituents, taxpayers. That's not what's happening. Everything that we do, especially with the team that I have the privilege of working with, we have all the checks and balances, cross T's, dot I's, everything. So I'm confident with the team. My hope is that we don't, for example, just spend $100,000 on a performance audit to come back with a 25K savings. Because I'm telling you now, and we're about 95% done with our budget book to give to our board, we're still cutting 2.5% across every department. I just took 10K out of my personal budget to make sure we can meet and balance our budget. So knowing that we're slicing, I'm like, I don't know what they're gonna see savings. When we talked about the contracted services, going through the budget process, we printed out every contractor we work with, 130 of them. And I promise you, we needed 129 of them. I couldn't let one of them go because a lot of it was speech language pathology. A lot of it was, you know, even athletic trainers, and we're struggling with that. You see, Pivot and went away from that. So, I mean, you know, and I say, and I'm doing that respectfully. You know, I'm not trying to be any type of way. I just know we're already tight and lean. And the budget pressures that's going to come down the line, I can't ask us to do anything different because we must account for blueprint. As you know, salaries across the board, minimum must be $60K by FY26. So you're not gonna get anything extra from me. I won't even be able to ask for assistant principals next year because we're also working on career ladder, which is a part of the blueprint. So a lot of the shock value ask that came from our district was reallocated by legislation, to be honest with you. It was asked for in good faith, not in mismanagement or just trying to ask for the sky. It was done in good faith. So my prayer is that whatever we ultimately do, we're not just giving someone 100K and we save 75K because now we're negative 25. That's what my thoughts are.
Seven. Need a majority or something.
Well, you know, I said you're good with it. Mark said he was good with it, so.
What's that?
7.
Is 7 scratched, or is there a good
That-
argument
that's
to
what-
keep
that-
it?
That's what we're talking about.
Well, we could leave it in and see how much it costs.
Can do that?
We could
Yep.
get a quote.
All right. Six, did we make a decision on 6? Did we? I'm sorry,
6 and 7 are very similar.
they are. Is that 6 more about? So an issue arose 2 budgets ago. 2 budgets ago, I think, about employees' reimbursement for mileage. It came to light that there were employees that it's their job to be on the road every day, and they were using their personal cars. And so there were some, because they were using their personal cars, so there was some discussion of whether it was more cost-effective to pay them mileage or to purchase cars and provide to them. Have you all looked at that?
Yes, we discussed that, and that's why we have a fleet of cars now that people must use when they have to travel from top of the county to the northern, to the southern part of the county. So I guess because of that inquiry a couple of years ago, we did purchase vehicles for staff to use, even for the superintendent. I don't use it, but we, just letting you know there's a car there.
It's not big enough for you.
Dr. Townsell, how many cars do you have in your fleet?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. Would you happen to know, Miss Karen?
Well, depends, in our building, we
Yeah.
have 5, and we probably have, there's still, food services has some,
Yeah.
child find program has some, so altogether maybe 13.
Maybe a dozen or more.
I was thinking 13.
Thank you.
6.
Unless there's something I don't know,
And that was the only thing that could come to my mind when I was reading through number 6. But you've addressed that, but I think it was, that was the thing that popped up when I read through number 6.
Sounds like that's addressed.
What about CIPs? I mean, the CIP tied into that too?
What's that?
The CIP
Capital
tied
improvement
into that as
budget.
well?
I don't,
Is there-
that's gonna be difficult. I don't know how you're going to,
Would that be in there?
you talk about analyzing how that we go about the CIP?
We don't want to talk about HVACs, because Mike will get all fired up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, would that be covered under that? That's my question. Would that be under 6?
That's a good question.
Then maybe 6 and 7 are combined and modified.
Did you guys look at this list before tonight?
No,
You just got this today.
yeah. It was,
But we knew about this meeting for a while,
it was given for discussion on Antoine.
Antoine.
Yeah, Antoine. Yeah, it was given for
So
discussion.
where do we have now? I mean, we start with something, I don't know what's on the list that we're looking at. Can we have the breakdown of what's crossed off at this point?
We've crossed off 1, 8, 9. We're gonna look at 7 to see if there's a cost. 2 was rewritten to look more at underserved and special needs.
And high achieving,
Excuse me?
and high achieving students.
Yeah, I forgot that on my list. So that's what we're trying to do. I think we scratched 3. Did we scratch 3?
We did not.
We haven't
We
talked
have
about
not.
3 yet.
We haven't talked about 3. Okay, so we're discussing 6 and 7, if there's,
I think 6 and 7 almost you could combine.
Just pick one.
Combine and rewrite them.
Mm-hmm. Rewrite 6 and 7 into one.
okay. And what's the goal of 6 and 7?
Well, I think Commissioner Allen brings up a good point. We spend millions and millions of dollars in that process. I mean, I've screamed about it for years, as you know. I don't know how, and it's been explained to me, so folks out there don't know, I have a huge thorn that if your HVAC system breaks at home, somebody shows up, they tell you what they need, and you go about it. For some reason in government, they come out and they have to pretty much throw away everything that you have, seems like every time, and then go out and get an engineering firm and come up with a system that's only gonna last for about 15 to 20 years, and by the time we get it paid off, it's no good again. And it seems like this never-ending cycle, and it's not like it's a few dollars, it's millions and millions of dollars across all of these buildings. So I have had a hard time with, there has got to be a more efficient way to go about this, but to my detriment, I have not found a solution, and it seems like we're stuck in this cycle of spending millions of dollars to just analyze it. Our own buildings as well, our pools, case in point, the way it was constructed years ago, it was doomed for failure. And in my personal opinion, so before that gets out there, it's my 20%. I didn't like it then, I don't like it now. But I would really hope there's a more efficient way to get HVAC done in this county. So,
But in their case, they're large systems. Generally, they are way over their life expectancy.
They
They're
are.
40 or 50 years old. And while they are costly, they're big systems. And
They
by
are.
the time they replace them, so, you know.
Well, if you're looking at it, 5, 6, and 7 have procurement.
Mostly, yes. Yep.
So can you just combine all 3 of them?
Yeah, because that, as we said earlier, by the time you take salaries out, that's about all that's left.
So we're combining 5, 6, and 7.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Final one, number 3, sir.
3.
Is that procurement too?
No, that's more about process. Checks and balances.
So do we have enough for guidance to rewrite what's here?
I think so.
Think you have enough for guidance to rewrite what's here and,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Move forward.
So, but with 3,
3. Yeah, because 3 is different. 3 is more about process.
I'll run down them very quickly when 3 is decided upon.
In or out?
In or out?
I think it's tough because Dr. Townsend just got here. And so he's, in my 20%, he's developing that as we speak. So to go back and look at a process that was before he got here, I don't know how efficient that would be. Just doesn't have enough body of work. Said 1 year. You know, so
That's a fair statement. I agree.
You
Agree
know,
with
There you go.
So 3 has been stricken. A review of all 9. 1 is stricken, 2 is rewritten, 3 is stricken, 4 moves forward as written, 5, 6, and 7 will be rewritten into 1. 8 is stricken, 9 is stricken.
That's what I have.
that's what I have as well.
Yep.
And we talked, and, you know, we've talked about cost a couple times. We assumed, ever since we started talking about this, that we're gonna pay for it. Even if, you know, if you had to pay half, we'd have to give you the money to
I knew
pay
you'd
your
have to
half
give us the
anyway.
money.
Exactly. So, we're gonna pay for it, whatever it costs, if we decide to move forward with it, so, you know.
All of you, Is that an agreement from all commissioners?
What
Or is
is-
that just your 20%?
No, I think that's
I agree.
100%.
That's 100%.
Okay.
I've got it written down.
Oh, I was
Yeah.
just checking, I mean.
Righty.
My memory's not what it used to be, but it's still close. So, we can draft up scope based on discussion tonight. We'll send that out for review, just take a peek, make sure if there's nothing glaring or greatly lacking. And then we'll move forward.
I'd like to bring it back to the Board of Ed. One last.
Oh, yeah, I was including that.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I missed
Yeah,
that, okay.
We're here all
Okay.
together.
Okay.
We're all gonna review.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. We're not leaving anybody out.
This here doesn't hear as well.
So,
Oh,
moving forward,
good.
this is gonna be rewritten. They're gonna see it. How long is it gonna take us to get it rewritten?
Oh,
Because time is of the essence.
yeah, we should be able to get a pretty quick turnaround.
And do we want to reconvene as a whole group again?
Probably not,
Okay. No.
yeah, because it's horrible getting all of us together.
yeah.
Yeah. So if we draft up a scope and we get it pretty close, if somebody's got some tweaks, we can figure that out between us. Get it where everybody is comfortable, hopefully, or at least the majority.
A week from today.
that's
It
tight.
depends on, how soon we can get something written up, so.
I think that's tight, I think a
Once
couple
we get
weeks.
it out, how about once we get it out, they have 7 days to get your comments back? How about that?
It's 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's probably 2 weeks.
A week to get it out, a week to get comments back.
So it's, and if the county attorney would be of assistance here, I think what has to happen is I need a motion to tell staff to do what we're getting ready to do.
Correct, and we can move forward with that.
So, I'm just speaking out loud. Is there a motion to develop a more defined scope of work and determine an estimated cost? Are we still looking to estimate that cost as we bring it back? Or are we accepting the fact that, what that cost is, we're gonna pay for it?
So I think that my 20%, because nobody will say anything. What we can do is develop a scope, we put it out for bids, then depending on what that cost is and that time frame, we make a determination
Going forward.
on
Yes.
moving
Yes.
forward. So if it comes back crazy
And
high,
then the board,
we may eliminate a few things just to get something moving,
and the BOE still has to vote
yes.
as
And if
well
it, depending
to
on the,
determine which way we're going.
depending on how long it takes to get results, we may have to narrow the scope to get something back that's usable.
Tangible.
Yeah. So is that good enough direction?
Yes, but I'm not clear on the motion, right?
Oh, we
right
haven't
on the
made a
floor
motion
right
yet.
now.
We're
Okay,
we're
okay.
formulating a motion.
Okay.
So, I mean, what I'm hearing is that you're good with creating the scope of work and directing staff to bring, as part of that scope of work, to also direct staff to put this out for bid. But I'm thinking that we need to bring it back for you in a work session. You need to finalize this, and Pam, is this another work session that we, not both boards, Board of County Commissioners, another work session?
You could bring it back as an old business item.
We can bring it back as old business, but at that point, we get direction at that point to put it out, and then we move forward from there.
I think, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that'd be the direction to go. That way, if there's a last minute tweak, you can do that during old business.
That's acceptable. If that's the board's desire.
You go with that?
All right. So we're gonna draft a scope based on the discussion tonight.
I wrote it down.
We're gonna, Todd wrote it down. We're gonna distribute that amongst all the members of both boards for comments. Once we get those comments back, we'll bring it back to us under old business for approval to put out to bid.
Yes, sir.
And then, but that'd be part of the motion, when those bids come back, we'll see what they are and determine how we wanna move forward.
Yes, sir.
That sound correct to everybody?
Yes.
Okay. You got a motion for me, Commissioner Ireland, since you wrote it down?
All right. So I make a motion that we review the scope of work, with direction given to, Administrator Willis and distribute that list of the scope of work to both boards. Once we get approval from that, place it out for bid with the bullet points provided for the performance audit areas. And once bids received, we'll again take a vote on whether or not to move forward. Did I cover it all?
I think you did.
Okay.
You did. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
And before we move forward, when will we, as two boards, get together so that we can convene another meeting
So,
and continue our discussions?
why don't we meet again once we've got the bids back and look at what they look like? How's that?
So this would be July. Could we put a time frame or a month to that?
Yeah, I'm just in my head trying to think of through the time. Man, it's probably gonna be time we. You gotta put out the bid for how long? 2 weeks?
Two successful.
2, 6, that's a week.
It's like 3
At
weeks.
least a month. Probably mid-September.
I would recommend that we not make our next meeting based on bids, but more or less a meeting of the board so that we can continue our collaborative relationship. That is my interest.
Okay. I was trying to work through the process for you. Sure. So what is today? Tomorrow's August. Yeah.
Is November a good month for you?
Huh?
November a good month?
Sure.
So we didn't vote to do it or not, we voted for the process.
Unless we piggyback. I'm sorry, I got 3 conversations going on, Madam President. November is a good month for us. Oh, for me.
So we can get our calendars
Yeah,
together far
yeah.
enough ahead
Yeah, because
to
it'll take
come
us
up
that
with,
long to get us all together.
to come up with a joint meeting date for our next meeting.
We start running into holidays too, so remember that,
Yes. Yeah, we'll work on November.
All right, so Ms. Maxey, if you will work with County Commissioner staff or Mr. Willis to come up with a meeting date in November that is amenable to everyone's schedule so we can continue our relationship.
And we will try to get together once we get the bids back,
Yes.
if we can make that work.
Do it over Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving.
It's at your house, right? We're all coming.
You can.
There you go.
That's our meeting.
There's more than
Thanksgiving
enough room.
Day. Last item on the agenda is public comment. Madam Council?
Keep you by your side on this.
Yes, good evening. The board adopted a resolution in 1989 intending to maintain the order and decorum of the governmental process. A copy is found here to my right. The Ethics Commission has asked that we remind speakers at public comment that lobbyists include those who seek to influence public policy, and lobbyists must register in advance. By Resolution 5120, any individual or the appointed spokesperson for a group is welcome to address the Board of County Commissioners on any matter germane to the business of county government. Persons addressing the board shall not be permitted to make statements or remarks that concern only the private activities, lifestyles, or beliefs of others unrelated to the business of the Board of County Commissioners or the professional duties and performance of its employees or the employees of its elected officials. Persons addressing the board shall refrain from statements, remarks, or conduct that is uncivil, rude, vulgar, profane, or otherwise disruptive to the conducting of the board's business. The floor has been open for public comment, first from persons in the meeting room who may begin making their way to the microphone, then those joining virtually. All speakers must identify themselves and whether speaking as an individual, which you will be allocated 2 minutes, or as the appointed spokesperson of a group, in which you will be allocated 5 minutes. For those attending virtually, if you wish to speak, please press *9 or use the raise your hand function. Virtual speakers will be identified by the last 4 digits of their phone number or screen name and unmuted one at a time. If necessary, you may unmute yourself by pressing *6.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Cormier, and I'm from Owings, Maryland. I'm going to talk on behalf of myself this evening. I want to start by thanking both boards for passing that budget and making sure that we had the increases for support staff and educators all across the board this year. I think we've done a good job talking tonight and collaborating for the first time in quite a few years. When you continue the discussion on the scope of this audit, I hope that we go from the point that Dr. Townsell took over, because he's made so many changes in this last year that I don't know if looking at all the processes from before that are going to produce anything that he hasn't already slimmed down. So when we go forward in this audit, we should be looking at where we've already changed our processes and how we can make them better. When we talk about the cost saving or the cost sharing, I'm glad that the county commissioners have agreed to pay for the whole thing, because it doesn't matter who pays for it. For me, I just want the grass to get mowed. I don't care who's on the truck. As we're looking for savings on things, we all buy paper. We all buy color ink. I didn't know we got color ink money. We all buy bulk fuel and utilities. Anything that we can do to share that cost or lower it, between the two boards, the two entities, it's all my tax money. Between Chespacks and Anne Marie Gardens, let's build that bridge and start taking field trips down there to get kids doing things in the county instead of taking them to DC.
Mr. Cormier, your 2 minutes.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joshua Johnson with Concerned Citizens of Calvert County. Appreciate everybody kind of trying to collaborate here. There's been a lot of things that are coming out, a lot of documents coming out, a lot of facts coming out. My daughter, she's always asking for something. Sometimes she would ask for $240. And if I found out that she had $230 in her bank account, that'd be concerning to me. So it was concerning when we found $23 million when you're asking for 24. And I think the biggest thing about this is, the commissioners have come to the table and given $13.5 million on the idea that they want to see what's best for this community. The taxpayers also need to know that their money is spent well. Because if you take that $24 million, almost $1,000 goes to every family here. And that's their money that is in the bank accounts, unbeknownst to them. And that was what was concerning about all of this. So I appreciate the fact that we're having an open dialogue. And I know Mr. Johnson, love your last name. Mr. Johnson is doing his best that he can on trying to find some of the errors that were in the past. But the past does matter. The leadership of the past does matter, because it is a part of our future. And we just want to make sure that moving forward, we have the taxpayers' best interest in mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Myra Gowans. I'm from Huntingtown, Maryland, and I am also very glad to see everybody here tonight. So let me state this. I've talked to the Board of Ed twice and made this statement. I know you all feel like it is adversarial somewhat asking for this budget, but you all both are public fiduciaries. The Board of Ed is a public fiduciary, and so is the Board of County Commissioners. And you all are answerable to your beneficiaries. I stated this to Ms. Claggett. You all are answerable and have to give, if there are any questions by the beneficiaries, who happen to be the parents and the taxpayers, you have to give that information, or you all can be taken out of the realm of being in charge. So I'm very glad to see tonight, I'm very glad to hear the comments that were made by the BOE and the BOCC. Because this is taxpayer money, you all have to work collaboratively. You all need to sit down and make sure that everything that's done is done for the parents, the student, and the beneficiary. And I want,
Ms.
that is
Gowans.
federal law and state law.
Your 2
Thank
minutes.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Pamela Cousins. I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I've not heard a compelling evidence-based argument to support the expenditure of a performance audit. So therefore, I do not support a performance audit being done. What are the issues? I've heard a lot of banter about what is suspected, but I believe the Board of Education did a pretty good job of explaining your questions. The district's budget book is crystal clear when you take the time, line by line, per department to see how each dollar supports each child per classroom. As elected officials, a better use of your time and money is to ask the school system CFO and the county's finance department to meet to glean a better understanding on how public education is budgeted from subject matter experts. Finally, it's disappointing to hear the Board of Education receive the 8 discussion topics pertinent to their ability to make an informed decision 2 minutes before this meeting. Good faith transparency is expected both ways. Since you asked for transparency, I would think that would work both ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Jerry Bell from Chesapeake Beach, speaking for myself. I've been a budget analyst for the City of New York, worked on a program to eliminate the budget gap where we saved the city $580 million. And from what I've heard tonight, as a former budget analyst, I don't think you're going to find the cost savings that you're hoping to find in the audit that you've proposed. The audit as proposed, and I'll wait to see the revised scope, but as those 9 items were presented tonight, that's not a blueprint for an audit, that's a fishing expedition. And I think that probably the answers that would best serve you are in the budget documents. I think that as commissioners, you can always go back to the Board of Ed and ask for clarification. You've got some great lawyers if you have questions about procurement and whether or not it's meeting state and county and local regulations. I think you've got the resources to solve it without outlay of hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is probably what an audit is going to end up costing you, to find that you aren't going to be able to save the cost of the audit. That's what I've got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Claire Hill, and shame on our BOCC and county employees. This is a mock meeting, much like in the movie Oppenheimer. You're attacking the people who are doing their job because you personally feel a need to control a nonpartisan group. This was an election stunt. The outcome will be paid by our students. When you continue with the farce, you will harm our schools. This directly hurts all the homeowners, the parents, your constituents. You were shocked by Dr. Townsell's request for funds, but you are admitting you have no clue about the new state education outlines with the blueprint and the costs associated with it. You admit the money for this audit that's scheduled to be done in the next 3 years will be paid by the taxpayers because of your own inadequacies. Our BOE has kept us rated at higher levels than what our BOCC members have been able to manage. I will speak with all of my constituents, neighbors, friends, church members, and ask them to stop, to ask you to stop wasting our time and hundreds of dollars in an audit because you're throwing away their money. Before you ask to work as a team with the BOE, you need to look into your own misunderstanding, misspending. We are not currently asking for a special audit of the current BOCC or Mark Willis' planning and zoning job, but perhaps we should do that first. It's fiscally a huge burden to hear that the kettle is calling the pot black. Please take care of the job we voted you for, not for what we voted them for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any more in the audience for public comment? Nathan, are there any individuals via Zoom?
There are no online speakers.
Thank you.
So thank you all for coming out tonight. We appreciate your comments. The chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Have a motion and a second that we adjourn. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Everyone have a good evening.